So the journalizing still depends on how well you have understood the first two topics. Okay? So it's very hard to kuan kaya they are connected. Journalizing, so this topic is also connected to the next topics and succeeding ng mga topics. So kumbaga, if you do not understand the first, then it's very hard to comprehend the next ng mga topics. So, going to start now. So you may want to prepare a pen or paper or any scratch. So just have a little kuan lang, a little practice. So please next time use your kuan Gmail sa St. Michael kay para di na mo mag-kuan, di na ako mag-admit. Okay, so diretso na mo mosulod pag if you use the SMCC nga Gmail. Okay, so okay, so before you reach this point, so hopefully you're already familiar with the nature of the asset, liability, and capital accounts. Okay, so which assets or which account titles fall under the asset category, which account titles na as a liability o sa capital. So, uh, before reaching this topic, so dapat you should already familiar with the concept of the normal balance. Okay, so for example, we say normal balance, these are the increases. Okay, so kung asa mag-increase ang mga account titles. Like for example, for asset, the normal balance of all the asset account titles are on the debit side. Okay? While liabilities and capital is na sa credit side. So meaning every time there's an increase in the asset, for example, cash, so ato na siyang gina-debit. Okay? If there's also an increase in the liability, let's say accounts payable, so ato na siyang gina-credit. Okay? Same with capital, atong gina-credit ang capital account if there's an increase. Okay? So those also need to understand that for every journal entries, the debit should equal the credit. Okay? So the total debit entries dapat mag-equal ang iyang credit entries. Okay? So kung dili na niya normal balance, okay, let's say the asset is a debit account, normally debit na siya. O if you want to decrease the asset, so dapat i-credit na nimo. Okay? So ang dili nila normal balance, that's where you credit the account. Okay? So kung makuha ang cash ang business, atong i-credit. Okay? Sa liability, so ang accounts payable normal balance is a credit. Okay? Pero kung mabayaran ng accounts payable, so atong gina-debit ang accounts payable. So journal entries or journal entry preparation. So after understanding the normal balance, so the next step is to analyze transactions. So diri na ang medyo tricking apart. Okay? So you have to ask before you journalize which account titles to debit or which to credit. Okay? So again, knowing which account titles to debit or to credit is very important kay kung diri pa lang nga step dili na mao. Okay? So expected that from to posting to trial balance to financial statements, mali na siya tanan. Okay? So sa journalizing pa lang dapat sakto na siya. Okay? So we have two types of entries. So we can prepare a simple journal entry. So on a simple journal entry, it is only comprised of a one debit entry and one credit entry. Okay? So again, one debit and one credit. When we talk about compound journal entries, so it's a combination, okay? So of one or more debit entries and one or more credit entries. So format, so what is the format in journalizing? So so the simple format is you have the debit and then sa next line, so if you notice na ay space, okay? Or I mean na ay indention. So from debit, there's an indention, credit, and then another indention for the explanation. So mo gini siya ang format nga gina-follow nato. Okay? Inani pag-journalize. So in the past na uban mag-journalize nga same ra og i-align ra nila tanan. So align ang debit, align ang credit, align ang explanation. So that is wrong. So dili na siya journalizing. So ang journal entry format mo siya debit, then sa next line you put an indention for the credit entries, and then another indention gikan sa credit for the explanation or a brief description of the transaction. So for example, na ay naka-receive ka o naka-collect ka cash from your sales. So the business, okay, so naka-receive siya cash, so that's an increase in the asset. So particularly increase in cash. So debit ka cash on hand, then you credit the sales because sales is a revenue account, di ba? So revenue accounts have a normal credit balance. Okay, so kung mag-increase ang sales, i-credit na to ang sales. And then another for the explanation, so you have cash sales transactions. Others would like to write to record cash sales, okay, or to be able or something like that. So walay problema kung gamiton to nimo, but for efficiency purposes, so kalas mo gud nagtinta, okay? So for example, in a business in one day there are a lot of sales transaction, there are a lot of customers. So para medyo makatipid-tipid ta gamay o makatipid ta sa time, so we usually I advise or I recommend na mugo mo immediately sa iyang description. Like for example, cash sales transaction or receive cash from customers. Okay, so anyway, when we journalize, it's automatic man niya, we record, di ba? So I think it's redundant na kung butangan pa siya auto-record. So that's the format, debit, credit, and explanation. So we have 6 models. Okay. So I will provide some examples for each model. So model 1 is increase in asset and increase in capital. Okay. So again, increase in asset. So as unsa man niya side na siya. Okay. So every time we increase an asset, ato siyang i-debit. Okay. Ang capital, if there's an increase in capital as a padulong, especially if it's an investment, nasa
Credit.
okay, nasa credit, tama. Okay? So debit kag asset, mag-credit ka sa capital. So first example, so mo pay pag-start sa business. Okay? So Paul the owner opened up a business enterprise with a trade name of VNR Services and invested 100,000 pesos cash into the business. So let's assume this is a laundry so many siya nga business. Let's say it's a laundry business. So mo pay pag-start sa business, so ang owner naghatag siya og 100,000 as a startup for the business. So number 1 tip in when you are journalizing, so always put yourselves in the shoes of the business. So imong hunaw-naon nga ikaw ang business. Okay? So for example, remember we have a separate entity concept or separate entity principle. So ang business ug ang tag-iya lahi na sila nga personalidad. Okay? Lahi na sila nga mga tao. Okay? So kung si owner naghatag og kwarta, sa may naitabo kang business. Okay? So si business, na siya na-receive nga cash, di ba? Gikan kay owner. So si owner, business, naka-receive og 100,000 cash. So si Paul ang tag-iya or the owner of the business. So he's a separate person. That's why kung naay mga capital accounts, atong ginapangalan sa tag-iya. Okay? So Paul, like for example, capital, Paul capital, or kung naay withdrawal, it's Paul withdrawal. So question, so did the business receive something? Nabay assets niya nga nag-increase based on the transaction. Okay? So man niya,
Yes, sir.
asset iyang na-receive. Okay? So cash on hand.
Ay, cash mo.
Okay?
Tama ba?
So it's either, depende na siya kung, of course, kung ideally dapat mas specific ta as to what type of cash, di ba? So if na-receive na nimo sa imong tindahan, that's actually cash on hand. Okay? Pero kung imong gi-deposit sa bangko, okay, or ang customers ni bayad diretso sa bangko, mabutang na siya as cash in bank. Okay? Cash in bank. But if you don't have a separate cash, okay, like kuan yun, pwede na siya cash nimo eh. Cash nga account title lang gamiton. Okay? Especially kung wala kay cash in bank. So, pwede na kay cash. Okay? Pero mas importante mo ang specific so that we can trace the outflow or the inflow of our cash. Kung asa na padulong atong cash o asa gikan ang ato ang cash. What is the explanation for the journal entry? Use of the business. So ang business daw kuno naka-receive og cash gikan kay Paul, ang owner. Okay? So the cash is invested by the owner to the business. So account titles affected ana. So for example, natay duha ka cash on hand or cash in bank. So let us use cash on hand. Okay? For example, kung gibutang niya dito sa automatic gibutang niya sa tindahan ang cash. So cash on hand and Paul capital. Okay? So Paul capital mo na atong gamiton niya account title for the investment. Okay? So debit, cash on hand. So ano nag-debit ang cash? Again, because there's an increase in the cash of the business. And cash is an asset account. Okay? So pag mag-increase ang asset, we debit the account. Okay? So for capital, for credit, so ang atong account title nga gi-credit is Paul Capital. Okay, so si Paul Capital, so dila na to gina-record ang mga investment ni owner. So kung magtugang siya, magbutang siya cash or maghatag ba siya mga inventory, mag-donate ba siya land or building for the business, so for the use of business, then that's an investment by the owner. So ibutang na nato siya sa Paul Capital or whatever is the name of the owner mo na ang pangalan sa capital. So for example, I am the owner of the business, pwede na ako ibutang dira Daniel Capital, okay, or Spina Capital. So as long as I can identify my name sa capital account. So journal entry for this transaction. So you have cash on hand, debit cash on hand, 100,000. And then credit nimo is Paul Capital, also 100,000. So diba the rule is dapat mag-equal imong debit ug ang credit. So that is why balance gyapon ni ang debit o credit. Natay debit nga 100,000, naputay credit nga 100,000. Pag diligay na sila mag-equal, then there's something wrong with your journal entry. And then another for your explanation, so you can put investment by the owner. So it's up to you sa inyo explanation dira basta kay dili layo sa transaction. Okay, like for example, Inani nga transaction pero imong gibutang dira sales by the from the customers. So dili man ni siya sales from the customer. It's an investment by the owner. So that's for the model 1. Wait, I want to check whether you let's have another entry. Okay? So aside from cash, so si Paul nag-contribute or nag-invest og land to be used in the business. So naayuta si Paul pero gusto niya nga i-donate sa business para gamiton. Para gamiton sa business, so that's the land is worth 150,000 pesos. So question, nabay na receive ang business?
Yes, sir.
Of course, di ba? So may na-receive niya, that's the land. Okay? He received land worth 150,000 pesos. Okay? Land is, asa man na siya napilong? Is it an asset, liability, or capital?
Asset.
Sir.
Okay? So land is an asset account. Okay? So therefore, nag-increase ang atong asset sa may buhaton. Atong
Debit.
i-debit ang land. Okay? Okay? So and then ano po di ba land is also an investment by the owner. So mag-credit na po tao capital. Okay? So that's why debit land 150,000 and then credit Paul capital 150,000. So for explanation, investment by owner or pwede the owner invested land. Okay? So basta kay it will briefly describe the transaction. Okay? So walay problema sa explanation basta kay related ra pud sa transaction. So okay, let us see if you have understood. So kamo daw ikuan ani. So Paul contributed office chairs and table into his business via NAR services amounting to 50,000 pesos. So what is the journal entry for this?
Furniture and fixture, sir, sa debit. Tapos, all capital sa credit.
Okay, so very good. Okay? So mag-debit ka og furniture and fixtures. So kasi nang uban tinga nga chairs and table ang nakabutang. Now if you have reviewed your previous kuan, 'di ba ang mga chairs and table nabilong na siya sa furniture and fixtures nga account title. So since this is an investment by Paul, so mo nang nag-credit tao, explanation ninyo ani. Okay, so natay debit, furniture and fixtures, 50,000. Credit, 50,000. Explanation, explanation wala.
Investment of the owner.
Pwede investment by the owner. Okay? So pwede na sa pagbutang ka direct, invested. The owner invested chairs and table into the business. Basta kay, it's a, kung lang na siya. It's a brief explanation of the transaction. Okay, so this is the answer. So debit, furniture, and fixtures, credit Paul capital. So again notice niyo ang format, wa sila nagtupong. Okay? Same with the amount, wala sila nagtupong. Okay? Ayaw itupong, basin unya diri na wala nagtupong pero ang amounts inyong gitupong. So dili gyapon na siya sakto nga format. Okay, so the right format is mag-debit ka 50,000, another intention for the credit, all capital, and then pati ang amount inyo sang butangag intention from the amount sa debit. Nag-debit. Then lastly is the explanation of the transaction. So very good. So next model is increase in asset and increase in capital. Okay? So kung gain na investment, there's an increase in capital pero ang reason nga nung nag-increase atong capital, it's because ang owner nag-invest. Okay? ang owner nag-invest og asset. In this case, the capital is increased pero dili tungod kay owner but tungod sa atong customers in the form of revenues. So mga halin. So increase in asset. So di ba every time nga maka-sales ka or makahalin ka, you will either receive cash or natay kolektahonon niya cash from your customers. Okay? So ang halin is called revenue or income. So again, pag mag-increase ang asset, so of course we debit the asset. If there's an increase in capital, so specifically mga revenue accounts, so we credit. Okay? So we credit the revenue account. So transaction. VNR services rendered services to its customers for cash amounting to 50,000 pesos. So what is another term for rendered? Saka lain niya pasabot sa rendered. Okay, so ang rendered means perform or you have already performed services for your customers. So for example, if it's a laundry business, so nahuman na nimo glaba ang mga sanina ni customers. Okay? So meaning na kay right nga manukot. Okay? So na kay right manukot. So which account titles are affected and which to debit and to credit. So unsa man nga account titles ang affected? Okay, so you analyze the transaction, nabay na receive ang business.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so may na-receive the business.
Cash, then ang credit kay revenue, service revenue.
Okay, so good. Okay. So naka-receive ang business o 50,000 nga cash. So our credit is a revenue account or an income account. Okay. So the entry is debit, cash on hand. So the cash is increased and then credit nimo ang service income. But in other depende na siya sa chart of accounts, di ba? So magihimo sa bookkeeper or accountant. So if the chart of accounts ang tawag niya is service income, so sa pag-journalize mo po ang imong gamiton. Pero if ang nakabutang sa chart of accounts is service revenue, so we use the service revenue. Okay? Pero in this case, let's assume na service income ang nasa account type as a chart of accounts. So we credit service income 50,000. Then as to explanation, so can have rendered services to clients or collected collected payments from the rendered or collected cash revenue from the clients. So depende na. Okay. So kaning sa explanation, so mas naay freedom ang bookkeeper o accountant unsay ilang i-explain. So the only limit lang diha is dapat related po kayo sa imo sa transaction. Pero ang debit o credit, dili na siya pwede nimo. Di ka pwede magbuot-buot sa imong i-debit o i-credit. So you follow what's on the chart of accounts. Okay, another revenue. So VNR services rendered services on account to its customers amounting to 75,000. So take note that the word nga on account. So unsay pasabot if on account. Okay, so
Wala pa
rendered
nabayaran.
services on account. Okay, very good. So I think some of you already know the kuan. Okay, accounting. Okay. So on account meaning this is collectible from customers. So nahuman na ka og labas sa iyang sanina pero wala pa ka sukot or wala na pa kay suktononon sa iyang cash. Okay, 'di ba? Wala pa kay kolektahonon kay customers. So amounting to 75,000. Okay, so wala gisulti ko na promissory note, 'di ba? So kung may promissory note gikan sa customer, so we assume it is a verbal agreement. So kung verbal agreement, we use the account title, accounts receivable. Okay? If na promissory note gikan sa customer, it will be notes receivable. Okay, klaro ba? Okay, so accounts receivable atong gamiton. So debit accounts receivable. So if you can remember, si accounts receivable is an asset account. Okay? Mo na siya kay nag-increase man atong kolektahonon, so mo na mag-debit ta og accounts receivable. So debit accounts receivable 75,000 and then credit na to ang service income also for 75,000 pesos. Okay, as to explanation, so you can write rendered services on account or perform services on account. So, so instead of cash, accounts receivable because wala tayo na-receive nga cash and it is on account. Okay, another scenario. So VNR services rendered services to its customers amounting to 75,000. So parehas gay na 75,000 yapon ang ang kolektahonon. However, in this case, the customer made a 30% down payment. So nag-down siya og 30% sa 75,000. And the balance is on account. Meaning, the 70% of 75,000, so asa man nagkuha ang 70%, so that's 100 minus 30% nga down payment. So therefore, 70% of 75,000 is our collectible. Okay? So analysis, so ang business, naka-receive siya og cash, di ba? Naka-receive siya cash worth 30% of 75,000 while the rest are accounts receivable. Okay, so what is 30% of 75,000? So kung calculate ninyo, that's actually equivalent to 22,500. So, natay kolektahonon, so ang nabilin, 75,000 minus 22,500. So ang nabilin ana is 52,500. So that's the receivable or collectible. So notice ninyo, same sila og debit. Unang pareha sila og alignment. So nag-debit ka cash on hand, kay naka-receive ang business, 22,500. Tapos, napagyud kay kolektahonon or accounts receivable nga, 52,500. So notice atong gi-align ang debit entries. Okay? So kung pareha sila debit, pareha sila alignment. And then, gi-credit na to ang service income. So for 75,000. So kung imong i-add ang mga debit, so it will still result to 75,000. So we always follow the rule nga, ang total sa tanang debit will equal to its credit. Okay? So this is an example of a compound entry. Okay, so para mas makasave tag space, of course, mas mayo kung mag-compound entry. Pero if you want simple entry, okay, so pwede maka mag-simple entry ani. So sa may mga simple entry nimo. So mag-debit kag cash on hand, credit kag service income, debit kag cash on hand 22,500, credit kag service income 22,500. Then another entry na pod, debit accounts receivable 52,500, credit na po kag service income 52,500. So those are the two simple journal entries. But again, di ba, naikaparehas nila, so which is, ang credit nila is both service income. So instead of having two simple journal entries, pwede ka mag-compound. Okay? So debit lang ka cash on hand, ug accounts receivable, and then credit nimo ang service income. So in that way, you can save more space. So as to explanation, so you have rendered services on account with 30% down payment. So kamo na bahala sa explanation as long as it will describe the transaction. Okay, so same, align ang debit entries, align po ilang amounts. So this is an example of a compound entry nga na ay more debit entries than the credit. So isa na ka credit entry pero duha ka debit entry. So later on, basig makakita tag duha ka more credit entries. So another for example for model 2 is VNR services, rendered services on account to its customer, and the customer has signed a promissory note amounting to 30,000 pesos. So na promissory note gikan sa customer. Therefore, we will not use the accounts receivable. Okay? Ang gamito na to is ang notes receivable. So pag ang customer gani naghatag og promissory note, then it is a receivable. Okay? Pag ang customer ang naghatag sa promissory note. Pero kung kita gani ang naghimo sa promissory note or ang business ang naghimo sa promissory note, it is a payable. Okay? A liability account. So journal entry, the notes receivable 30,000, credit ka of service income also 30,000. So explanation ani for this transaction, rendered services on account with promissory note. So rendered accounts. Okay, so I think we're done with model 2. So let's have model 3. So an increase in asset and increase in liabilities. So, di ba, every time na maghulam ka, mag-borrow kag money, of course, the business will receive cash. So, nabay nag-borrow diri og kwarta pero wa ka receive og cash. So, given nga, ni-agree na nga, mahulamon. Okay, so, every time mo borrow or mag-loan, so you will receive an asset, which is cash, but it will also increase your liability. Okay, so mag-increase imong bayro nun. So, for example, so, namang may cases nga dili enough ang cash sa business to finance its operation, di ba? If you notice gayon na mga accounts receivable, na collectible. Okay? Okay ra tanag pwede sad nimo i-collectible imo mga expenses, but most of them are paid in cash. Okay? For example, salary sa imo mga empleyado, bayad sa bills, so bayad sa renta. So these are expenses nga kinahanglan og cash ang imong i-bayad. So even though you have sales, nagadako kag sales, pero if your cash is short, okay, or kulang, so you will resort to borrow money. So pwede ka sa bangko, pwede sa credit, sa mga co-op, or you can use your credit cards. So for example, si VNR Services, nag-borrow siya money from Bank of the Philippine Islands or BPI amounting to 300,000 pesos to finance its operation. So how will you journalize this transaction? Okay, so first, you have to determine unsa nga account ang gamiton. So kung nag-borrow man ka, you will receive cash. So you have cash on hand. Since this is a liability, so this is not coming from our supplier. So you can use loans payable to increase the liability. So sa ito yung nature sa mga liabilities, asa nga side sila mag-increase?
Credit.
Okay, so very good. Again, so credit na to ang mga liabilities. Okay, if there is an increase. How about kung mag-decrease ang mga liabilities? Tayo, mabayaran na ang loans.
Debit.
Okay, very good. It's debit. Okay. Later on, kung mubayad na ta sa atong loan, ato na siyang mabaliktad na ni siya. Okay? Mubayad ba kag loan, so makuhaan imong cash. So mag-debit kag loans, mag-credit ka og cash if magbayad na. Pero in this case, sa Model 3, mo pa may pag-borrow nimo sa money. So that is why gi-debit na to ang cash, credit na to ang loans payable. So explanation, receive the proceeds of the loan or borrowed money from BPI. So whatever is suits your koan. You want whatever explanation you want to write in your journal entry. So second scenario, so si VNR Services purchased a computer at SY Appliance Center amounting to 35,000 on account. So pag nagani mga words nga on account, okay, or bill, okay, sabot ana, these are either kolektahon na nimo nga amount or are you the customer? Are you receive the 35,000 or ikaw ang magbayad og 35,000? So sige purchase ni VNR. Nag-purchase siya og computer at SY Appliance Center amounting to 35,000 on account. Okay? Customer ba nato si SY Appliance?
No.
No. Unsa man nato? Kinsa may customer ni SY?
Kita. Ang sa
Okay, so
ang
kita.
Januar services. Mali na eh.
So sakto. Sakto, di ba? Ang kita mo'y customer. So kung kita ang customer, kita ang mobayad og 35,000. Kinsa may nakakita nga nag-purchase na kag computer tapos ikaw pa'y mangayo kay SY og 35,000. Okay? So you have to analyze the transaction kung unsa imong say roll the business. Siya ba ang mobayad o siya ba ang mo collect? So kung kay ba na kag on account, so always magid na it's a receivable or a payable. But the question is, unsa man ka, receivable o mag-receive ka or mag-pay ka? So kung mag-receive ka, it is an accounts receivable. Pero kung ikaw ang mubayad, then it is a payable. Okay? So we purchase a computer. The computer is under what account title? So let's assume nga it's under office equipment. Okay? So ang computer is under the office equipment niya, account title. And then our liability account is accounts payable. So anong accounts payable ang gigamit? Okay? So we usually use the accounts payable from kung nakautang ta sa atong supplier. Okay? So si SY Appliance Center is our supplier for the computers and equipments. So we use accounts payable. And then we use accounts payable kay wala magiingon diri nga himo taong promissory note. Diba? Nabay nakasuwat, wala ta naghatag og promissory note. So therefore, it is only a verbal agreement between VNR and the SY Appliance. So we use accounts payable. So journal entry, so you have debit ka, office equipment is an asset. So kay nag-increase atong asset, so with debit. So office equipment, 35,000. Liability, nag-increase. Diba? So we credit accounts payable, 35,000. As to explanations, so you have purchase of computer on account. Okay, so remember, basta na gani words nga on account sa transaction, masabutan na niya cash. Kung mas dagan ang credit kaysa debit. Okay, so PNR services purchases. So kung gay na computer karon photocopier na sad ang gipalit ni PNR. Pero this is on account gihapon. So PNR services purchases a computer, a photocopier on account from SY Appliance Center amounting to 65,000. 65,000 ang worth sa photocopier. So under the terms, 10% down payment and the balance on account. So nakagi-down nga 10% sa 65,000. The rest ana is your payable. Okay, imong bayro nun in the future. So debit ka, office equipment. So same ra gyapon, although nagbayad ra kag 65, pero the worth of the office equipment is still 65,000. So 65,000 imong gamiton. Then nag-credit ka, di ba? So notice, di ba si cash is an asset account. Pero anong nag-credit Macau? Cash on hand. So it is because nakuhaan o kwarta ang business. Okay, nagbayad man ka. So therefore, makuha ang cash ang business by 10% sa 65,000. So 65,000 times 10% is 6,500. Okay. So muna siyang natay credit niya. Cash on hand, kaya nag-decrease man atong cash. So pag mag-decrease ang isa ka asset, di ba, ibutang nato siya sa credit side. Another transaction, so accounts payable, or another account is accounts payable, 58,500. Okay. So if you total the credit entries, so kung i-add mo ang 65 o 58,500, it will still result to 65,000. So ang atong debit ug ang credit still in balance. So you can have explanation niya, purchase of photocopier on account with 10% down payment. Okay. So dili kailangan niya taason ang explanation dira. Okay. As long as masabtan. So notice also that their amounts are also aligned sa mga credit entries. Align ang ilang account titles, align po ilang amounts. But of course, they are not aligned with the debit. Okay, so still this is an example of a compound entry. So kung gusto kag simple entries, so pwede ka magbutang dira office equipment, debit office equipment, 6,500, credit, cash on hand, 6,500. Another na po niya entry, office equipment, 58,500. Credit ka o accounts payable, 58,500. So, for the compound entry, so why not i-add na lang nimo ang mga debit. Similar ang mag-account. So, office equipment, 65, credit, cash on hand, credit, accounts payable. So let's have the fourth model. So it's a decrease in assets and then decrease in capital. So the decrease in capital is due to mga expenses or mga bayro nun, and then withdrawal by the owner. So when we say withdrawal, these are assets of the business nga kuha ni tag-iya. Ikuha sa tag-iya para gamiton for personal. For personal. So decrease in assets. So because every time magbayad ka, every time na nata expenses, of course it involves a decrease in asset. So particularly, ugamay ang cash kay magbayad man. Okay? So there's a cash payment. So for example, so PNR services paid. Okay? So paid gani, there's a cash outflow. So paid rental expenses for the month amounting to 4,500 pesos. Okay? So, ang gibayaran niya kada month is 4,500. So, debit nimo rent expense. Okay? So, si rent expense or mga expenses in general have a normal balance of debit. So, nasa siya sa debit side. So, nag-increase man na itong rent expense. So, you debit rent expense, 4,500. Pero nag-credit kag cash, also 4,500. So, ano nag-credit kag cash because you pay you pay the rent using the cash of the business. So, ligamay ato ang cash. Then, as to explanation, pay the rent for the month. So, for other expenses like salaries, so ibutang rapod mo dira, salaries, uh, and wages expense sa debit, and then whatever is the salary amount niya imong gihatag, that's your cash. Okay, credit cash. So let's say salaries expense of 15,000. So mag-credit ka cash on hand also 15,000. So if these are utilities like water, electricity, or internet, so mag-debit ka og utilities expense, credit ka og cash on hand. So those are for expenses. How about if it is a personal withdrawal by the owner? So example, so Paul the owner withdraw 2,000 pesos for personal use. Okay, so diba we follow the separate entity concept. So the business is not the same as the owner. So ang mga personal transaction ni Paul, dili nimo i-appeal sa transaction sa business. So for example, ang gigamit nga money is for bayad sa tuition sa iyang anak or bayad sa bill sa ilang balay na wala naka-benefit ang business, it should not be part of the uh, should not be recorded in the books of the business because it's for personal. So, so you have journal entry. So withdrawal is a debit normal balance, and it will also decrease the capital. So debit Paul withdrawal 2,000, then you credit cash on hand. So, nagkuha siya og 2,000 sa business. So nakuha ng business og 2,000 niya cash. So credit ka cash on hand 2,000 pesos. Another example for this is katong mga sari-sari store, di ba? So, usually pag naakay sari-sari store, di ba, di naman kamo palit sa laing tindahan. So, mas dito diyan na lang kasi imong tindahan magkuha para sa inyong sudaan or hugas pa karon. Okay? So, kanto siya, katong gikuha sa tag-iya nga mga dilata, mga kapugas, okay, mga kindi, mga supplies, dili to siya considered as sales. Okay? Considered to siya as withdrawal. Okay? So, withdrawal sa tag-iya. So, whatever is the amount sa gi-withdraw, ibutang i-debit na siya as withdrawal. So, for example, nagkuha ka og bugas worth 5,000 para sa consumption ninyo sa family. Okay? So, ang i-debit nimo is, for example, ikaw si Paul, so Paul withdrawal 5,000, ang i-credit nimo is merchandise inventory. Nakuha nimong inventory. Okay? So, credit ka merchandise inventory also worth 5,000. So again, in accounting, we follow the separate entity principle. So kung sa transaction lang sa business, mo ay i-record sa business. Kung dili na wala naka-benefit ang business ana, then do not record. Okay, for example, nagkuha kag kwarta para ipalit nimong sakyanan, pero ang sakyanan wala naka-benefit ang business, so it should not be recorded as an asset of the business. Okay? After na siya padulong sa withdrawal. So model 5, so you have decrease in assets, also decrease in liabilities. So mo ni gaina kabaliktaran sa pag-borrow og money. So sa model 5, nag-pay na ta sa ato ang liability. Okay, so ato nang gipangbayaran ang mga payables. So decrease in assets, so therefore ato siya lang i-credit. Okay? So pag mo gamay atong asset, so dito sa side nga dili nila normal balance. So kung ang normal balance sa asset is debit, therefore mag-decrease na sa iyang credit. Same with liabilities. A normal balance sa liability is on the credit side. So pag mag-decrease ta og liability, atong i-debit ang liability. Okay, so transaction. VNR Services paid its loan account with Bank of the Philippine Islands amounting to 300,000. So you are now going to pay your loan kay BPI. So debit nimo. Okay, so para mawala na ang loans payable, so debit loans payable 300,000, and then you credit cash on hand because you will use cash, di ba? Kung magbayad ka. So makuhaan ang cash sa business. So you credit cash on hand, also 300,000. Explanation is payment of the loan. Right. So sunod na po nato gibayran is ang atong bayro nun kay SY Appliance Center. Pero in this case, we only pay 70,000 lang. So gibayad sa nato is 70,000. So pag debit tag accounts payable, kay di-decrease man atong accounts payable by 70,000, and then we use cash to pay, therefore mugamay atong cash or mo decrease atong cash also by 70,000. Debit accounts payable 70,000, credit cash on hand 70,000. Explanation is paid the account of SY Appliance Center. Okay, so now we're down to the last model. So tanan nga wala ni fall under models 1 to 5, padulong na siya kay model 6. So sa man nga mga accounts. So there is an increase in one asset and decrease in another asset. So especially kung usually mahitabo ni pag makolekt na nato ato ang receivable. So mag-receive ka cash pero ma-decrease ato ang receivable. Or increase in one liability account and decrease in another liability account. Okay, so for example, there's a transfer, so from accounts payable to notes payable. So sa una, pag-borrow nimo wala tay wala promissory note, pero karon na may promissory note, so you transfer from accounts payable to notes payable. So increase in one capital, increase in another capital account. So also decrease in capital and increase in liability. So kaning third increase in one capital or decrease in another capital, this happens every time nga magsara og libro. So kasi magsara og libro, dapat zero na imong expenses o income. Also decrease in capital, increase in liability. Okay. So examples sa model 6. So repayments. Okay. Let's say ang last chart of accounts is prepaid rent. So transaction, VNR Services paid 1 year rental in advance for 120,000. So imong renta for the whole year, imong gi-advance og bayad. So the whole year nga rental is 120,000. So the prepaid rent is an asset account because um, you are still the owner, the landlord, has the obligation niya papuyon ka for the entire year because you have already paid for the amount. Okay, kibera na gud ni man tibuok tuig. So therefore, ang landlord has the obligation to let you stay or let you rent the place for 1 year. Dili pwede nga nagbayad na kadaan tapos hawaon ra ka after 1 month. Otherwise, you will collect yung the payment nga wala na kuan, wala na gamit. So prepaid rent 120,000, credit card cash on hand 120,000. So nag-credit card cash kay of course you will use cash to pay the advance nga rental. So paid rent in advance for 1 year. Okay, another. So you already received the cash. Di ba na kay accounts receivable na I think it's more than I think it's 30,000 na siguro to. But in this case, you only collected 20,000 lang ato sa accounts receivable. So kung makakolect ka, of course you will receive something, di ba? You will receive the cash. So debit card cash on hand 20,000 and your credit accounts receivable, it's because nigamay naman ato ang collectible by 20,000. So kanigamay man ato accounts receivable, so we credit the accounts receivable also by 20,000. So as the explanation, you have collected the account from the customer. Okay, so last, so unearned. So may nature sa unearned. So the unearned service income, so although na income sa last, but it's actually not an income account. The unearned service income is a liability. Okay, anong liability siya? Because the customer is waiting for us to deliver the goods or perform the services. So pareha na sa mga online. So if ang customer nimo, if you're the online seller, tapos naka-collect na kadaan of cash, tapos wa pa na-deliver, the cash that you receive is under unearned service income. Okay, or unearned sales. So napay obligation niya mo deliver sa goods and services. So for example, PNR services receive cash 100,000 from customers but have not yet performed the services. So naka-receive na kay cash pero wala pa kayo na-perform nga service or pa ka nag-deliver of goods. So that's an example of unearned service income. So debit card cash on hand because you receive cash worth 100,000 pero mag-credit card liability nga account called unearned service income also 100,000. Explanation, collected payment in advance. Okay, so these are some of the transactions nga usually naa sa business. But again, the discussion nga I have given here is not exhaustive, not complete. Okay? So mas dagan pag yung accounting transactions nga wala pa siya na papadari. Okay? So even if you have an accounting nga libro nga subject sa una, not all transactions can be written or naadya sa or tanan ma-discuss. Okay? So that is why it needs also a practice or to be immersed with experience para mas ma-expose. Okay, so we're done with the presentation. So we have discussed the different models and the format for the journal entries and when to debit and when to credit and what to debit and what to credit. So, okay, so any questions or clarifications you might want to ask? So before we end the class. Okay, so again ha, wala pa exam. Okay? Sa next meeting, wala gyapon this exam because I will discuss the posting. Okay? So posting pa ang buhaton next or ledger. Okay? So we will have your midterm exam by November, sa man ni siya? I think it's November 7. Okay? So we will not meet on November 7 so that you can have your time to answer the midterm exam. But for now, next week, next Saturday, discussion lang SATA. So I will provide an assessment para ma-practice mo. Siguro tomorrow I can already start uploading it in the Neo. Pero the deadline ana is good for 1 week. So you have until the next Saturday to finish the assessment. Okay, so para lang naamoy ma-practice. Okay, so I will also upload this PowerPoint. Okay, once mo man ako discuss sa next nga klase. No more questions, clarifications? Okay, so I think wala na. Or if you are shy, you can use the chat box. Ha? Nawala di ang presentation gay na.
Ibalik naman, sir.
Nibalik na. Okay. Kasi akong screen di na ako makakuan mong good. So sa mga inana nga case, ikuan jud ko. Okay, do not use the chat box especially kung naka-start na kong presentation because I cannot read your comments. So, mga problems nga inani, so use the mic para inform ko. Okay? So, or na gusto magpasulod, or gusto mo sulod, so di na ako na makita diri sa kuan. So, especially kung naka-start na ko present sa PowerPoint, di na ako makita kung kitsay sulod sa inyong comments. So, in those cases, you can use the mic. Okay? Okay, so if you have no more questions, then so I think that's it for this afternoon. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for listening. So hope to see you next Saturday.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Yes, sir.